Grandma Ruth slipped the flash drive into my palm during dessert, her wrinkled fingers cold against my skin as she leaned close to my ear. "Watch it alone, Cassandra," she whispered, her voice barely audible over my cousin Jake's loud story about his new motorcycle. The small black device felt heavier than it should have, like it carried secrets that could break things. I glanced around the dining room. Mom was refilling wine glasses, Dad was arguing with Uncle Mark about football scores, and my sister Emma was scrolling through her phone, completely unaware that our 78-year-old grandmother had just passed me what looked like evidence. The way Grandma's eyes stayed on mine, urgent and sad, told me everything I needed to know. Whatever was on that drive would change how I saw my family forever. "My name is Cassandra Delacroix, and I spend my days managing the front desk at Riverside Medical Center, checking in patients and coordinating appointments between 3 different departments. The lobby smells like disinfectant and coffee from the machine by the elevator that never quite brews strong enough. I've worked there for 6 years, ever since graduating from community college with my associate degree in medical administration. At home, I share a 2-bedroom apartment with my roommate Jenna, who works nights at the call center and leaves energy drink cans on the kitchen counter. Our place overlooks the parking lot of a strip mall with a Pizza Hut and a nail salon that changes ownership every 2 years. The walls are thin enough that I can hear Mrs. Chin next door watching her Korean soap operas at full volume every evening at 7. Growing up, I was the family mediator, the one who smoothed over arguments and kept everyone's secrets. When my parents fought about money, I was the one who distracted Emma and Jake with board games in the basement. When Uncle Mark got divorced, I was the one who made sure he still felt welcome at family gatherings. Being the oldest grandchild came with responsibilities I never asked for but accepted anyway. Grandma Ruth has always been my anchor in our chaotic family dynamics. She taught me how to make her famous sugar cookies and how to spot a liar by watching their hands. Her small house on Maple Street holds 40 years of family memories, photo albums stacked on every surface and handwritten recipes tucked between cookbook pages. She never missed a birthday or graduation, never forgot to ask about my job or my dating life. The flash drive felt like a betrayal of everything I thought I knew about her. Grandma Ruth wasn't the type for dramatic gestures or family secrets. She was practical, straightforward, the kind of person who said what she meant and meant what she said. If stories like this make you think about your own family differently, hit that subscribe button. We're all carrying secrets we don't know about yet. The problems in my family always centered around money, specifically the money that should have been Grandma Ruth's inheritance from her late husband. Grandpa Henry died 3 years ago, leaving behind a modest savings account and the deed to a small rental property downtown. Nothing extravagant, but enough to keep Grandma comfortable in her retirement years. My father, David, had been handling Grandma's finances since Grandpa's funeral. He convinced her she was too old to manage investments and property taxes on her own, that the stress would be too much for someone her age. Grandma trusted him completely, after all. Dad worked at First National Bank and understood complicated financial matters better than she did. But things started feeling wrong about 18 months ago. Grandma mentioned having trouble paying for her blood pressure medication, something that should have been easily covered by her insurance and savings. When I offered to help, she waved me off with embarrassment, claiming it was just a temporary mix-up with the pharmacy billing. Then came the smaller signs. Grandma stopped hosting Sunday dinners because groceries were getting expensive. She turned her thermostat down to 65 degrees even in winter, wearing multiple sweaters indoors to save on heating costs. The woman who once bought Christmas presents for all 12 grandchildren suddenly gave only handmade gifts, apologizing for not being able to do more. Meanwhile, my parents had made several major purchases that seemed beyond Dad's bank salary. A new SUV, expensive renovations to their kitchen, a vacation to Florida they posted about constantly on social media. When I asked Mom about Dad's promotion or bonus that must have made these luxuries possible, she became vague and changed the subject quickly. The worst moment came last month when Grandma asked me to drive her to the doctor because she couldn't afford the taxi fare. In her purse, I noticed she was using expired coupons and counting change carefully at the pharmacy counter. This was the same woman who had helped pay for my college textbooks just 4 years earlier, who never hesitated to slip me $20 when I was struggling to make rent. Something was deeply wrong, but I couldn't prove it. Every time I brought up concerns about Grandma's financial situation, Dad assured me everything was being handled properly. He showed me official-looking documents with bank letterhead, explained investment strategies that sounded legitimate to my untrained ears. The family dinner was supposed to celebrate Jake's birthday, his 22nd marked by Mom's homemade lasagna and a chocolate cake from the expensive bakery downtown. We gathered at my parents' house like we did every month, the dining room filled with the usual conversations about work and weather and neighborhood gossip. I noticed Grandma seemed different that evening, quieter than usual and watching everyone with careful eyes. She barely touched her food, pushing lasagna around her plate while Uncle Mark dominated the conversation with complaints about his new boss. When Jake started showing off photos from his recent ski trip, another expensive adventure that seemed beyond his part-time job income, Grandma's expression grew even more distant. Dad was particularly animated during dinner, discussing his latest project at the bank and hinting at possible advancement opportunities. He mentioned taking on additional responsibilities, managing larger accounts, gaining experience with estate planning and trust management. The way he spoke suggested these weren't hypothetical future goals, but current realities. After dinner, while Mom served cake and coffee, Grandma excused herself to use the bathroom. She was gone longer than necessary, and when she returned, she seemed to have made some kind of decision. Her shoulders were straighter, her jaw set in a way I recognized from childhood when she was preparing to deliver difficult news. The flash drive exchange happened during dessert conversation, so smooth and practiced it seemed rehearsed. Grandma had clearly planned this moment, waiting for the right opportunity when everyone else was distracted. The urgency in her whispered words, "Watch it alone," carried weight that made my stomach clench with anticipation and dread. After we cleared the dishes, I helped Grandma to my car for the drive back to her house. She was silent during the 15-minute trip, staring out the passenger window at familiar neighborhoods that suddenly felt different. When I walked her to the front door, she squeezed my hand one last time. "You're the only one I can trust with this, Cassandra," she said quietly. "And you're the only one strong enough to do what needs to be done." I drove home with the flash drive burning in my pocket, knowing that whatever secrets it contained would either destroy my family or save what was left of it. That night, I sat in my bedroom with my laptop, the flash drive in my palm like a small black judgment. Jenna was at work, the apartment silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and Mrs. Chen's television through the thin walls. I kept staring at the device, afraid of what I might find but more afraid of what would happen if I ignored it. I almost didn't watch it. The comfortable lie of family loyalty felt safer than whatever truth Grandma Ruth wanted me to see. Maybe Dad really was just helping her manage complicated finances. Maybe the expensive purchases were legitimate, earned through hard work and smart investments. Maybe I was imagining problems that didn't exist. But then I remembered Grandma counting change at the pharmacy, her embarrassment over medication she couldn't afford. The woman who had raised 4 children during the recession of the 80s, who had worked double shifts at the textile factory to pay for Dad's college education, was now rationing her blood pressure pills to make them last longer. I plugged in the flash drive and opened the single video file it contained. The footage was grainy, clearly recorded on Grandma's old digital camera that she usually used for family gatherings. The timestamp showed it was filmed 2 weeks ago in what looked like Dad's home office. The video showed Dad at his computer, completely unaware he was being recorded. Grandma must have hidden the camera behind books on his shelf, angled perfectly to capture both his face and his computer screen. What I saw in the next 27 minutes destroyed every assumption I had about my father's character. Dad was systematically transferring money from Grandma's accounts into various other accounts, some in his name, some in Mom's, some in what appeared to be shell accounts with generic business names. He was forging Grandma's signature on withdrawal slips, using her social security number to open credit cards in her name, and worst of all, he had somehow gained power of attorney over her finances without her full understanding of what she was signing. The video showed him on the phone with someone, laughing about how easy it was to convince old people to sign documents they couldn't read properly. He mentioned specific amounts: 38,000 from her savings, 12,000 from the sale of grandpa's rental property, even small amounts from her monthly Social Security checks that were being redirected to accounts she didn't know existed. Watching my father steal from his own mother, hearing him joke about her declining eyesight and trusting nature, felt like watching a stranger wear my dad's face. This was the man who had taught me to ride a bike, who had stayed up all night helping me with algebra homework, who still called me his little girl even though I was 24 years old. By the end of the video, I was crying angry tears that felt like they might never stop. Grandma Ruth wasn't just struggling financially, she was being systematically robbed by her own son, the person she trusted most in the world. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Grandma's house. She was waiting for me in her kitchen, 2 cups of coffee already poured, her hands steady despite what she was about to discuss. I asked how long she had known, how she had discovered Dad's theft, why she hadn't confronted him directly. Grandma explained that she had started suspecting something 6 months ago when her bank statements stopped making sense. Numbers didn't match her memory of deposits and withdrawals. Accounts she thought were closed showed activity she didn't recognize. When she asked Dad for clarification, he always had explanations that sounded reasonable but never quite felt right. She had started keeping her own records, writing down every transaction in a notebook she hid behind her recipe box. The patterns became clear over time, money disappearing after she signed papers Dad claimed were for tax purposes or insurance updates. She realized he had been using her trust and her declining vision against her, presenting documents for signature that weren't what he claimed they were. The secret recording had been her idea, though it took weeks to figure out how to set up the camera without Dad noticing. She had to pretend she needed help with her computer just to get him into his office, then make excuses to visit repeatedly until she captured enough evidence to prove what was happening. My first instinct was to confront Dad immediately, to demand he return every stolen dollar and confess to the family what he had done. But Grandma stopped me with a firm hand on my arm. That approach would give him time to cover his tracks, to destroy evidence and claim the money had been legitimately gifted or invested on her behalf. We needed professional help, but that presented its own challenges. Grandma was ashamed of being victimized by her own son and worried about the impact on family relationships. She didn't want to press criminal charges unless absolutely necessary, hoping there might be a way to recover her money without destroying Dad completely. I convinced her to let me consult with a lawyer, someone who specialized in elder financial abuse. The attorney, Margaret Walsh, reviewed the video evidence and confirmed that Dad had committed multiple felonies: fraud, forgery, identity theft, and violation of fiduciary duty as power of attorney. But building a legal case would take time, and meanwhile Dad continued transferring money out of Grandma's accounts. Every day we waited meant more of her savings disappeared into investments and purchases that benefited him rather than her. My first attempt at gathering additional evidence backfired badly. I tried accessing Dad's computer while visiting my parents for Sunday dinner, hoping to find financial records or email communications about the stolen money. But Dad had password-protected everything, and my clumsy attempts to guess his login information triggered security alerts he noticed immediately. That evening, Dad called me with casual questions about my interest in his computer, whether I was having problems with my own laptop that might require his technical expertise. His voice was friendly but watchful, the tone of someone who suspected something but wasn't sure what. I realized I was in over my head, that amateur detective work could jeopardize a real investigation if I made too many mistakes. Margaret Walsh recommended a forensic accountant who specialized in financial elder abuse cases. Patricia Kim was in her 40s, methodical and thorough, with experience untangling complex theft schemes that often took years to fully uncover. She reviewed Grandma's video evidence and bank records, mapping out the pattern of theft that totaled nearly $87,000 over 18 months. The investigation took 6 weeks. Patricia discovered that Dad had been even more systematic than the video showed. He had opened investment accounts using Grandma's identity, taken out loans against her house without her knowledge, and even applied for credit cards that were mailed to his address instead of hers. The forged signatures were sophisticated enough to pass casual inspection, but wouldn't survive expert analysis. Meanwhile, I had to maintain normal family relationships while knowing the truth about Dad's crimes. Sunday dinners became exercises in acting, smiling, and making conversation while watching him spend money he had stolen from his own mother. The hardest part was seeing Grandma pretend everything was fine, playing the role of grateful mother while her son continued robbing her blind. The confrontation happened on a Wednesday evening in Margaret Walsh's office. We had invited Dad under the pretense of updating Grandma's will and estate planning documents, something that seemed routine enough not to raise suspicions. Patricia Kim was there with printed evidence organized in manila folders, bank statements, and transaction records that painted an undeniable picture. When Dad saw the forensic accountant and the lawyer, his face went through several expressions: confusion, recognition, and finally a kind of calculating assessment as he tried to figure out how much we knew and whether he could talk his way out of trouble. Margaret Walsh presented the evidence methodically. The forged signatures, analyzed by handwriting experts. The unauthorized account openings, traced through banking records. The diverted Social Security payments, documented with government forms Dad had filed fraudulently. Most damaging of all, Grandma's secret video showing him in the act of transferring her money while joking about her gullibility. Dad's first response was denial, then anger at being secretly recorded, then attempts to justify his actions as legitimate financial management for an elderly parent who couldn't handle complex decisions. But the evidence was overwhelming, and Margaret Walsh had prosecuted enough similar cases to anticipate every excuse. The choice was simple: cooperate with full restitution and avoid criminal charges, or face federal prosecution for elder abuse, fraud, and identity theft. Dad could either return every stolen dollar plus interest and penalties, or spend the next 5 to 10 years in federal prison. Watching my father realize he had been caught was like seeing someone drown in slow motion. All his confident explanations crumbled when faced with documented proof. The man who had seemed so clever, who had convinced himself he deserved Grandma's money because he was managing it anyway, suddenly looked small and desperate. He agreed to full restitution that evening, signing legal documents that would liquidate his investments and force the sale of assets purchased with stolen funds. The SUV, the kitchen renovation, even Jake's ski trips, everything would be sold or reversed to return Grandma's money. The financial recovery took 4 months. Dad had to sell the SUV and take out a loan against his own retirement accounts to cover the full restitution amount. Mom initially defended him, claiming the whole situation was a misunderstanding, but changed her tune quickly when she realized her own financial security was at risk. Jake and Emma were devastated to learn their father was a thief. The expensive gifts, the ski trips, the casual spending they had enjoyed, all of it had come from their grandmother's savings account. The guilt was almost worse than the anger, knowing they had benefited from crimes committed against someone they loved. Uncle Mark surprised everyone by being the most supportive family member once the truth came out. He helped Grandma change all her bank passwords and moved her accounts to a different financial institution where Dad couldn't access them. He also volunteered to take over her legitimate financial management, with strict oversight and monthly reporting requirements. The family dinners stopped. There was no pretending things could go back to normal after such a fundamental betrayal of trust. Grandma Ruth was polite but distant with Dad, accepting his court-ordered apologies, but never forgiving the deeper violation of using her love against her. I found myself in the strange position of being both the family hero and the family destroyer. Grandma was grateful I had helped her recover her money, but my parents treated me like a traitor who had chosen sides instead of keeping family business private. Emma and Jake were caught in the middle, wanting to maintain relationships with both their father and their grandmother. 6 months after the confrontation, I moved into a small apartment near Grandma's house, partially to keep an eye on her financial situation and partially because I needed distance from the complicated emotions surrounding my parents. Jenna understood and helped me pack, never asking for details about why I was relocating so suddenly. Grandma and I developed a different relationship after the crisis. She treated me more like an equal, someone who had proven capable of handling difficult truths and making hard decisions. We had coffee every Saturday morning, talking about everything except the money situation, rebuilding trust in small daily increments. 2 years later, I still work at Riverside Medical Center, but I've started taking evening classes toward a bachelor's degree in social work. The experience with Grandma's case taught me how many elderly people suffer financial abuse from family members and how few resources exist to help them navigate those betrayals. Dad and I have a careful, distant relationship now. We exchange birthday cards and see each other at major family events, but the easy trust between father and daughter never returned. He paid back every dollar with interest, completed court-ordered financial counseling, and avoided criminal prosecution, but some violations can't be undone with money. Grandma Ruth is comfortable again, her medications covered and her heating bills paid without worry. She never had to sell her house or move into assisted living, never had to depend on the son who had stolen from her. The independence Dad had tried to take away was restored, along with her dignity. The flash drive sits in my jewelry box now, a small reminder of the night everything changed. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had ignored Grandma's warning, if I had chosen comfortable ignorance over difficult truth. She would have continued suffering in silence, too proud to ask for help and too trusting to believe her own son was stealing from her. Trust, once broken, leaves different shapes when it heals. My family looks different now, smaller in some ways, but more honest. The people who stayed proved themselves worthy of staying, while the relationships that couldn't survive truth probably weren't worth preserving anyway. Grandma taught me that sometimes love means protecting people from the ones who claim to love them most. Sometimes being family isn't enough to justify looking the other way when someone is being harmed, even if that someone is your own father.